The Elder Scrolls Skyrim isn't just another RPG, it's a cultural touchstone. Released in 2011, it's gone on to sell over 60 million copies and become a household name even among people who never played an Elder Scrolls game before. Skyrim's streamlined mechanics and accessible gameplay loop served as a gateway RPG for a whole generation of gamers who might have found earlier, more complex titles intimidating. It broke into the mainstream in a way that few fantasy games ever do, spawning countless memes, pop culture references, and of course re-releases on every platform imaginable. Even today, over a decade later, Skyrim still seems to maintain a timeless allure. Its atmospheric world, iconic soundtrack, and open-ended design have given it an almost mythical status. The game is still drawing players in, even in 2025. It still boasts far higher player numbers than some very recently released RPGs on Steam, and even small YouTubers such as myself are still able to get thousands of views on Skyrim guides every single day. And with such an enduring legacy, it's no surprise that anticipation for the next chapter, The Elder Scrolls VI, is sky high. But that anticipation is a double-edged sword. As one Bethesda veteran put it, Skyrim became a cultural phenomenon, and one of the best-selling games ever, which created a level of fan expectations that its sequel will struggle to overcome. In this video, I want to talk about both the excitement and skepticism surrounding The Elder Scrolls VI. From the impossible hype that it faces, to design challenges like recapturing Skyrim's simplicity, evolving the open world formula, or supporting the modding community that has allowed Skyrim to thrive for so long. Let's start with what you could term the impossible hype problem. More than 14 years have passed since Skyrim's debut, and we still have only the briefest teaser trailer for The Elder Scrolls VI. With Bethesda's long silence and the ultra-protracted development cycle building up fan expectations to a nearly impossible level. Every additional year without concrete Elder Scrolls VI news is another year for the legend of Skyrim to grow, and for fans to continue to imagine their perfect sequel in finer and finer detail. The result is a hype bubble that may burst if reality can't match fantasy when The Elder Scrolls VI finally releases. We've seen this scenario before, massive anticipation leading to inevitable disappointment when a game finally launches. Cyberpunk is one of those cautionary tales. Years of build-up and promises led fans to expect a revolutionary experience, but at the game's launch, technical issues and design compromises left many disappointed. The same happened with No Man's Sky. Marketing painted a picture so grand that the initial project felt like a flop to many, though it's fair to say that both of these titles have redeemed themselves to some extent at least. Even Bethesda's own Starfield has faced this very same problem. Hyped to extreme levels since its 2018 teaser trailer, some players built up wild expectations of procedurally generated galaxies that somehow still offered endless depth. Expectations that no game of this generation could fully deliver on. But in Starfield's case, at least Bethesda did eventually pull back the curtain with substantial gameplay previews, whereas The Elder Scrolls VI still remains a cipher. Like I said already, Bethesda's near-total radio silence on The Elder Scrolls VI is something of a double-edged sword. On one hand, it avoids over-promising, but on the other, it fuels so much speculation. In the absence of facts, the community has filled the void with rumours, wish lists, and unfettered theories. Online forums are rife with speculative leaks and feature wish lists, some so specific and far-fetched that there's almost no way the actual game can include everything that's been imagined. Due to this scarcity of information around TES6, every tiny hint, cryptic tweet, single piece of concept art, and even offhand comments by Todd Howard gets dissected and magnified into grand conclusions. This runaway hype is something that Bethesda will have to manage carefully, and indeed they've acknowledged as much. Todd Howard himself admitted that announcing the game so early, way back at E3 2018, was unusual and driven largely by fan pressure to reassure people that the game was in fact coming one day. And as a consequence, due to the combination of this premature announcement, the game's extended development cycle, and the massive success of its predecessor, Bethesda now carries the burden of sky-high, arguably impossible expectations. If The Elder Scrolls VI isn't a generational masterpiece that scores 10 out of 10 across the board, some fans will inevitably cry foul. But the truth is, Skyrim hit at a perfect time and became a phenomenon for many reasons that were outside of Bethesda's control. And expecting lightning to strike a second time, this time under such immense scrutiny, is asking a lot. All we can do is remind ourselves to keep expectations in check, to hope for a great game, a fantastic game in fact, but maybe not the infallible messiah of gaming. One of my big concerns is that the level of pressure placed on Bethesda will cause them to believe that they need to achieve something totally revolutionary, potentially leading them to make sweeping changes to the tried and tested Elder Scrolls formula, rather than iterating on it in the way that worked so well for Skyrim. One of Skyrim's secret weapons was in fact its simplicity, at least relative to prior Elder Scrolls games. With Skyrim, Bethesda deliberately streamlined many traditional RPG systems to make the game more accessible. There was no convoluted class selection at the start. There was no overly complicated leveling system or tedious weapon degradation, for example. And instead, Skyrim opted for a more pick-up-and-play design. This drew some criticism from veterans of the series, myself included, who saw it as a dumbing down compared to Morrowind or Oblivion. But it undeniably opened the floodgates for a much wider audience. Millions of players who never touched an RPG before suddenly found themselves slaying dragons, joining guilds, and poring over perk trees. For many, Skyrim was their first RPG, their entry point into the genre. And of course, by contrast, older Elder Scrolls games were much more complex. Morrowind, released in 2002, had far more extensive attributes and skills. In fact, every weapon type was a separate skill, for example. And the game notoriously offered very little hand-holding. You had to read journal clues to find quest objectives, and everything wasn't just fed to you in the way that we experience in modern titles. Of course, Oblivion, released in 2006, did streamline some of that. But Skyrim took it a step further, simplifying attributes, removing skills like acrobatics and athletics entirely, and introducing an intuitive perk system that was far easier to navigate than the systems that had preceded it. Indeed, many Skyrim players who go back to try Morrowind out of curiosity are often shocked by how unforgiving the older game's systems feel. And those bold enough to go back to Daggerfall, or even Arena, get a real eye-opener, trust me on that one. This leads to a really important consideration for the Elder Scrolls 6. Should the series continue down the path of further simplification with each new title, likely driving away some lifelong Elder Scrolls fans forever? Or should the game embrace more complexity, taking a step back towards the roots of the series, but at the same time risking the mainstream winning formula of their previous title in the process? The answer may lie in how the gaming audience has evolved. On one hand, many recent mainstream hits have continued the trend of streamlined design and emphasis on quality of life features. Many AAA games launch with extensive tutorials, simplified core systems, and a general sense of holding your hand through pretty much everything. But if you take the RPG genre in isolation, can we really say that modern RPG titles are sharing in this success? After all, recent games to follow this formula have performed poorly in terms of player numbers, with Veilguard and Avowed as key examples. Whereas elsewhere, we're seeing a renaissance of complex RPGs finding large-scale success. Look at Baldur's Gate 3, an unapologetically deep D&D-based RPG with intricate systems, which has become a massive mainstream success. Players proved with Baldur's Gate 3 that we can still handle complex rules and systems if the experience is rewarding enough. This is clear evidence that there is a market for depth, and that perhaps the Elder Scrolls 6 could layer back in some richer mechanics without alienating the players. After all, modern audiences do engage with RPG mechanics in varied ways. Some love min-maxing characters and delving into spreadsheets of stats, whereas others prefer a more casual experience where they can't build their character too far wrong. Knowing this, Bethesda might aim for a flexible approach, perhaps offering layers of complexity to the systems of the Elder Scrolls 6, and through this offering options for both audiences to enjoy. Of course, this is an incredibly difficult balance to strike, and one that Bethesda will no doubt agonize over. How can they evolve the RPG mechanics enough to feel fresh and deep, without betraying the elegant approachability that made Skyrim such a legendary title? Another major contributor to Skyrim's success was its open world design, which in 2011 set a very high bar. But open world gaming has evolved significantly since then. In Skyrim, you're dropped into a vast map full of points of interest, dungeons, towns, and quest givers. The game expertly nudges you to explore. For instance, many quests send you across the map, inevitably drawing you past enticing caves or ruins, creating a sense of organic discovery alongside the marked objectives. However, Skyrim still largely uses the exploration formula that we got used to for so many years, basically a compass and map markers pointing you to your objectives. In the years since Skyrim, we've seen games experiment with much more minimalistic or immersive navigation, actually in some cases reverting to the more old school RPG approach of leaving you to work it out for yourself. 2017's Nintendo title Breath of the Wild is actually a really good example of this. After the game's brief tutorial, the entire map of Hyrule is basically marker-free. You're only really given a couple of vague main quest objectives, and then you're set loose to find your own way. This actually represented a bit of a revelation to some players, primarily the younger ones, and a return to form, let's say, for some of the more grizzled RPG veterans. But either way, players reportedly loved the genuine feel of freedom and discovery in Breath of the Wild, where climbing a random hill could lead to a hidden shrine with no heads-up display icon aggressively prodding you in its direction. Elden Ring took a similar philosophy. The game presents a massive world with only the lightest guidance, basically a few NPC hints and subtle environmental clues. There's no straightforward quest system or map markers built into Elden Ring. Players are forced to engage their brains and actually think about what they might need to do next. This design trusts the player to a degree rarely seen in modern AAA games, and it paid off, with many players citing Elden Ring's sense of exploration as the best that we've seen in years. Even the lack of formal quest log was celebrated by many as a refreshing change from games overloaded with waypoints and to-do lists. I think the lesson here for Bethesda to take into the Elder Scrolls 6 is that many of us love an open world. But we've grown tired of the copy-paste fetch quests and icon clutter that's been so rampant in the genre for the last 2 decades. We crave worlds that feel truly alive and that are ripe for organic exploration. For the Elder Scrolls 6 to feel fresh, it's going to need to innovate on Bethesda's now outdated formula for open world exploration. That could mean more dynamic world events, or even just new means of traversal that add new layers to exploration. TS6's world won't impress players by simply matching that of Skyrim's. It needs to offer new ways to interact with that world. For instance, Elden Ring added the spectral steed that drastically changes how you traverse terrain, and Breath of the Wild adds things like gliders. And more importantly, reasons to use them, areas that you could reach or gameplay features that you couldn't engage in without them. And of course, storytelling in open worlds has evolved. Gamers will expect quests that they stumble upon in the Elder Scrolls 6 to have depth and consequences. You can't just get away with bandits stole my family heirloom filler quests anymore. Skyrim's world was amazing in 2011, but many of its side quests did boil down to simple tasks with very little branching. In a post-Witcher free world, Bethesda are really going to feel the pressure to up the narrative quality of even the optional content. In short, they can't simply copy Skyrim's playbook for the open world. They need to build on the best of the last decade's innovations, while still retaining that unique Elder Scrolls flavour of a richly simulated game world. If they do pull that off, we could be in for something that feels both comfortingly familiar and excitingly new. But admittedly, that's a tall order. Another one of the very key reasons that Skyrim is still relevant today, 14 years on, is of course its modding community. Bethesda games have always thrived on player-made mods, but Skyrim took this to another level. Fans have created thousands of mods that do everything from fixing bugs and improving graphics to adding entirely new quest lines and areas to explore. This virtually endless stream of user-generated content is what has kept Skyrim feeling fresh. There's always another mod to try, another crazy fan-made quest or visual overhaul to refresh the experience. Skyrim's modding community is to this day still one of the most active in all of gaming, and it's a huge part of why the game has stayed relevant for over a decade. On PC in particular, Skyrim is less a static product and more a platform or sandbox for players to customize to their heart's content. This has given the game unmatched replayability. It's not uncommon to hear of fans who have played for thousands upon thousands of hours over many years, almost entirely thanks to the mods that constantly reinvent the game. This leads us to a big question. Will Bethesda allow the Elder Scrolls 6 to be as moddable as Skyrim? On the one hand, as I've already said, Bethesda has historically embraced mods. They've continually released mod tools for their games and even brought official mod support to consoles in the Fallout 4 and Skyrim Special Edition era. We can almost certainly expect that the Elder Scrolls 6 will have a creation kit and support mods on PC and likely Xbox as well, especially now that Bethesda is under Microsoft. However, there is a shadow of concern in the community due to Bethesda's attempts at monetizing mods. In 2015, a Valve Bethesda experiment with paid mods on Steam infamously backfired, with huge community backlash and a quick reversal. Later, Bethesda also introduced the Creation Club, essentially a more controlled system where they sell curated, effectively Bethesda-approved mini DLCs. This too was met with mixed reactions. Some people appreciated the new content, but many modders and players feared that it was a slippery slope towards limiting free mods. The worry is that The Elder Scrolls 6 might lean even harder into an official, perhaps closed mod ecosystem where Bethesda has more control and takes a cut of the profit, no doubt. Of course, there's nothing wrong with a company trying to monetize its hard work, but there have to be limits. The problem here is that if they restrict things too much, they risk fracturing the fan base, disincentivizing the modders, and losing that incredible tailwind that mods have given their games. On the flip side, one could certainly argue that Bethesda learned some lessons from the backlash of some of their previous moves. Creation Club content was relatively limited, and they still left the door open for traditional modding outside of it. In my opinion, the ideal scenario for The Elder Scrolls 6 is that Bethesda continues to fully embrace the modding community, and that they accomplish this by providing powerful mod tools, ideally even more powerful than Skyrim's, and of course allowing the free sharing of mods. Realistically, for The Elder Scrolls 6 to outlive Skyrim in the long run, robust mod support is essential. Think about it. Even if TES 6 is a phenomenal game at launch, part of The Elder Scrolls' appeal is that it's a world that you can keep molding and expanding, and mods will be what enables that in The Elder Scrolls 6, just as it has in Skyrim. Moving on to one of the juiciest topics of speculation around The Elder Scrolls 6, which is its setting. Tamriel, the continent on which The Elder Scrolls series is set, has several provinces that we're yet to fully explore in the main series. Based on Bethesda's cryptic 2018 teaser, which showed a rocky landscape and coastline, many have speculated that Hammerfell or High Rock are the likely settings for TES 6, with Hammerfell in particular getting several hints at this point. Hammerfell is the vast desert and mountain homeland of the Redguards, located to the southwest of Skyrim, while High Rock lies to Hammerfell's north and is home to the Bretons. Fans have noted that the teaser's terrain, effectively craggy mountains by the sea with ruined structures dotted around the place, could match the Iliac Bay area, which lies between High Rock and Hammerfell. In fact, Bethesda even teased Hammerfell in the 2021 New Year's image on social media, which many took as a clue. And a main series game set in Hammerfell would be no bad thing. From what we know about Hammerfell, it could offer a tantalizing mix of environments, consisting of vast stretches of desert, fertile grasslands, and rugged mountain ranges. It has major cities like Sentinel and Rehad, rich Redguard culture and history, and even the opportunity for seafaring and piracy along its coasts. Meanwhile, High Rock offers a more classic medieval fantasy setting. Think feudal kingdoms, castles, with its centerpiece being the city of Daggerfall. A familiar name for those who have played The Elder Scrolls 2, which actually encompassed both parts of Hammerfell and High Rock, which in itself proves that there is precedent for a multi-province game. And fans are quite excited by this idea, as it could make The Elder Scrolls 6's world the biggest and most diverse yet, at least in terms of actual meaningful exploration experiences. Yes, I know technically Daggerfall is the size of Great Britain, but 99.99% of it is just completely empty, so I'm not counting it. And I'm one of the probably very few people who have actually spent quite a lot of time running around that open world, and it truly is empty. Anyway, personally, I'm hoping for Hammerfell, as I think it could bring a new tone to the game. Imagine sweeping desert dunes with the ruins of lost civilizations, or ancient Redguard sword singer legends playing into the main story. It's a chance to break from the primarily European medieval vibe of Skyrim and Cyrodiil, and to explore a different culture within Tamriel. We might even see more seafaring, with Hammerfell having a long coast on the Abyssinian Sea. Indeed, there are of course many rumours and certainly fan hopes that naval gameplay could be a real feature. And Bethesda's recent advancements, such as what they built for Starfield's spaceship systems, could translate into boats and ships in The Elder Scrolls 6. If Bethesda can take advantage of this technology and allow for seamless ocean faring and naval combat, well, that could certainly be one way in which The Elder Scrolls 6 could top Skyrim, as per the title of this video. But of course, a game's setting can only take it so far. And in recent times, we've seen some quite beautifully presented games prove to be utterly hollow when it comes to real substance. Again, my mind wanders towards the Veilguard in particular. So outside some of the ideas that we've already talked about in this video, what other new or improved features might the Elder Scrolls 6 introduce? Well, better NPC AI is practically a given, considering how much AI has advanced since Skyrim. I don't think I'm being unfair when I say that Skyrim's NPCs, though somewhat charming, were often incredibly clunky. It would be great to see the Elder Scrolls 6 push the Radiant AI much further so that NPCs have more reactive schedules, behaviours, and interpersonal reactions. It would be great to see NPCs that dynamically react to the world, for example, forming opinions of the player based on their actions, but in a meaningful way, or perhaps even something a bit more novel such as competing with the player for quests. Bethesda's Creation Engine 2, first used in Starfield, has also made strides in areas like NPC animation and physics, which should carry over into the Elder Scrolls 6. And hopefully we'll see more interaction with the world in terms of things like destructible environments. This hasn't featured in previous games in the series, but with more modern technology, maybe TES 6 will allow a bit more environmental destruction, even if it's not full-scale Battlefield-style destruction, perhaps more localized destruction, blasting apart doorways with spells, or damaging structures in fights with a dragon, for example. Imagine a battle where a rampaging dragon can actually crater the ground or topple a tower. It would add a whole new dimension to gameplay, and of course a whole new generation of hilarious Bethesda patented bugs. Modern technology also means that the world should be more immersive in subtle ways, dynamic weather effects that affect gameplay, more wildlife and ecosystem behaviours, and larger crowds in cities, for example. Another feature could be improved crafting and building. Skyrim dabbled in letting players build a homestead through the Herfire DLC, and in fact Fallout 4 went further and allowed you to create a full settlement. So perhaps the Elder Scrolls 6 might expand on that, giving us an enhanced ability to build and customize property, or perhaps even lead a faction with base building mechanics enabling you to create something of a fortress or headquarters for that faction. Maybe you could even defend it as you do in Fallout 4. And of course, it almost goes without saying that we'll absolutely be expecting substantial technical leaps in graphics and sound. A next generation Elder Scrolls game absolutely needs to feature stunning vistas, highly detailed cities, and immersive lighting effects that make those candlelit dungeons extra atmospheric. Bethesda's own developers have hinted at the fact that Starfield's technical development will directly benefit the Elder Scrolls 6, so I think this is a very realistic expectation to hold. In fact, I don't feel that anything I've said so far is particularly far-fetched. After all, I'm not a major game studio tasked with coming up with the next generation of RPGs. Bethesda, however, are, and they've had a long time to dream and experiment, so hopefully their ambitions far outstrip those of a simple YouTuber who just wants a game to milk for content for the next decade. I am aware that I am contradicting myself somewhat after saying that we should temper our expectations earlier in the video, but it's hard not to get excited thinking about the possibilities. Sailing a ship from a desert port in Hammerfell to the foggy harbours of High Rock, and running into a naval battle on the way, engaging in sword duels and sorcery on the deck of the enemy's ship, riding a dragon to ancient mountaintop ruins, or commanding my loyal guild of knights and rogues in a battle to defend our garrison. With all of this going on in a living and breathing world enabled by advancements in graphics and AI. So, what is the answer to that million septum question? Can the Elder Scrolls 6 actually top Skyrim, or will it merely languish in the shadow of its predecessor? Well, from a technical and design standpoint, TES 6 will surely outstrip Skyrim in many ways. It almost has to, given the advances in tech and the lessons of the past decade. We'll get better graphics, probably a bigger world, smarter AI, and likely more refined gameplay systems. However, surpassing or even matching Skyrim isn't just about streamlined systems, technical advancements, and scale. It's about impact and legacy. In many ways, Skyrim was a perfect storm. It arrived at the right time, captured a huge audience, and became a pop culture phenomenon. It's the RPG that even your non-gamer friends know by name. It's produced countless memes, it's been referenced in TV shows, and it's been re-released so often that Skyrim on your smart fridge became a running joke, until Bethesda actually put Skyrim on Alexa as a bit of a gag. In other words, Skyrim broke out of the gaming sphere in a way that few titles ever do. That kind of cultural footprint is hard to replicate by design. It may be that no matter how amazing the Elder Scrolls 6 is, it won't have the same novelty factor. Skyrim was many players' first big open world RPG, whereas now open world RPGs are commonplace. The bar is simply much higher now for blowing people's minds. Nostalgia will also play a big role. Skyrim now benefits from over a decade of nostalgia, and an entire generation has rose-tinted memories of chasing butterflies in the meadows near Whiterun, or hearing the Dovahkiin theme erupt as they fought their first dragon. Those memories are cherished, and The Elder Scrolls 6 in many ways will be competing against an idealized memory of Skyrim as much as it is the game itself. It's similar to how any new Star Wars movie will inevitably be compared to the nostalgic glow of the originals. 10 years from now, will people still be loading up Skyrim for comfort? Or will The Elder Scrolls 6 have finally taken its place? It's possible that TES 6 won't be able to displace Skyrim in the public imagination, simply because Skyrim was there first and it earned that legendary status. And you know what? That's okay. The Elder Scrolls 6 doesn't have to erase Skyrim to be a success, it just has to deliver a phenomenal experience in its own right. There's a good chance that The Elder Scrolls 6 will be seen as another excellent chapter rather than a revolutionary leap, and considering how high Skyrim set the bar, even coming close will be a massive achievement. So maybe the better question to ask is, what do we, the players, truly want from The Elder Scrolls 6? Do we want it to be more of the same? Basically Skyrim with a facelift and a new story? Because we love that formula so much? Or do we want it to take bold risks and try new things, even if it means it might feel different or divisive? The truth is, there's a broad spectrum of fan desires. Some crave the comfort of familiarity, while others demand innovation. And in an ideal world, The Elder Scrolls 6 will manage to do both to some extent. Provide that warm, immersive Elder Scrolls core experience, and at the same time push the franchise into new territory. Now, you've given me the courtesy of listening to my opinion for 27 minutes, and I hope you'll now give me your opinion in the comments down below. Also, if you've been enjoying my content, then you might be interested to know that alongside my substantial library of YouTube videos, I also offer a whole bunch of bonus content on my Patreon, and I'm growing it every week. This includes additional RPG videos, guides, downloadable PDFs, and even access to a private Discord where we can communicate directly. And as a bonus, if you sign up, you'll be supporting a creator who's trying to monetize their content in an honest and open way rather than just taking shady sponsorship deals. If that sounds good to you, then you can join today using the Patreon link in the description down below. Either way, thanks for watching, and I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day.